First of all, thanks for coming to us, Naima and Antoine. What are the most important points that you took from, first of all, what was the course like over there? I don't think anybody's really sat down with you guys to ask briefly, what was that course like? Ladies first.
For me, the course was very intense. From day one when you arrived, the agenda was set out, you're in a room with other senior officers, staff, colleagues, and you're just trying to figure your way in and out. I think the most difficult part coming from Bermuda is that you don't always have that baseline going in because we don't have numerous people coming from the Bermuda Police Service, so you don't have that baseline like the UK officers have. So you're almost a bit discombobulated going in. But I would say the most pleasing part is that although we are in Bermuda, when you get out there and you start going through the curriculum, we can actually stand toe to toe. We actually have a lot of knowledge and experience that we could bring to the table. So it was a bit unsettling at first, but actually you get settled in quite quickly and you realize that you have every right to be on this course just like everyone else.
Sure, Antoine.
Yes, the same, similar, I echo the comments of Ms. Astwood. It's a bit difficult at first because you're away from family. It's a different culture. They have a better baseline because they work to the laws and regulations of that country, whereas Bermuda, we have to adapt. But policing, the core principles are the same. And as Ms. Astwood would say, as once you get rolling and into the course, you just see that you have as much talent as the others. And that's like the top 1 or 2% in the UK policing, that you're competing against. Remember, this course, the strategic command course, is based on creating police officers who they see from there who have the ability to go to a higher level.
Take over, commission.
Yes, so those are the ones. So there's very select few where they've chosen from. So, yeah, for me it was a very refreshing change. I think we learned a lot while we was over there, but also what we also got out of it was that we're doing a lot of things right in Bermuda.
Sure, and you both passed, right?
Yeah.
With distinctions. Yes. As soon as January to March, you took the course. World was normal then, what they say, right? You, just before you came back, COVID hit. So were you able to implement any of that coming right back, or you had to adjust again with COVID?
Policing is dynamic, and I've been here 26 years. Mr. Daniels has been here a lot longer than me. But one thing we've learned is that it's never 2 days alike, and you always have to adjust and be mobile and be able to be transient in your actions. Were we expecting it? No. However, what was really key is during the course, we are taught on how to prepare for different events that may happen. And we had one lecturer that came in and he was saying how everyone's planning for terrorism and Bitcoin and everything else. He said, but the biggest thing that would take us out is the epidemic. And funny enough, a few weeks later, we have an epidemic, and he just said, this is what would take us out because you can't always plan for it. It's so many different variables and things that you have to plan for. But the best thing that we can do is that we always have a base. You always have to evaluate and review and say, how can we improve? How can we get better? And the biggest thing that you can take away from it is communication, because this is a worldwide pandemic and other people are experiencing the exact same thing. So trying to do it in isolation is the worst thing you can do, is that the whole world is experiencing it, and that's where you learn, that's where you grow.
Yeah, I fully agree. You could never plan for a pandemic per se. However, any plan should be fluid, adaptable, and it should have contingencies. And we found that in Bermuda, whereby in the pandemic phase, you were policing or putting policing regulations in place that generally people will be free. So, for example, curfews.
Shelter in place.
Shelter in place. You're telling people to do things or asking people to do things that is not really normal. But generally, people followed the rules, and it wasn't much enforcement by the police in that level. However, I will say, and Ms. Astwood would laugh at this one, we had one of our lecturers that came in, and it was a popular Welsh saying where he says, trust in God, but tie up your camel. And what he was basically saying by that is that if you just have a plan that's one-dimensional, and even though you trust, you got the highest trained people, things can go wrong.
Yeah.
So you have to have that contingency. You have to have a plan that's adaptable, fluid. You can change direction, and policing, that's what policing's about.
What was the interaction like with the regiment during all of that shelter in place? Because you had to work closely hand in hand, but the two of you.
We've worked with the regiment before. So last year I was the Go Commander for COP Match, and we worked with the regiment. So this isn't new to us. We often work with the regiment, obviously a lot more closely during COVID, but it's very seamless. They have a job to do, we have a job to do, and we actually come together quite well.
Sure. Okay, let's get a little specific now, more specific. Cousin?
Yes.
Marijuana is being legalized, but our officers relaxing on making the bust that they used to do. Officers equipped to see if someone has, I think the legal limit is 7 grams or less. Are they equipped to deal with all that?
Well, it's quite complexity around that, so obviously have to be careful.
I think you should clarify, it's being decriminalized.
Yes,
Not
decriminalized. So we have to be very careful around that particular topic. So in terms of the 7-gram issue that's been, I think it's the last 2 years or so, the police officers obviously don't have a scale where they can measure 7 grams, but obviously policing is around using your discretion, right? So if you see a person or individual you stop and they have small amounts of marijuana, you're obviously going to seize it and have it tested and examined. However, that even becomes more difficult with the new legislation, whereby in order for marijuana to be deemed marijuana, it has to have more than a 1% THC level. So it's added to the complexity. And we don't have the testing capacity in Bermuda for that. So it's some of our cases now are actually suffering from that because we can't do that measurement. We don't have that actual machine. Although I fully understand what the rationale behind why the laws are, being adopted and changed. So in terms of, as we said just now, in terms of policing, we have to adapt to the changes in the environment. And that's what we were doing. So our guys, we give them a really some good guidance, a good policy. So when they go out, they're really clear on what they're supposed to do, what their powers are, and I think it worked. So far, it's worked pretty well.
Sure. I ran into you at a cricket match.
Yes.
What happens at a match? You smell that somebody's over there burning, is what they say, right? You just turn a blind eye to that, or?
No, you don't turn a blind eye. But see, this is another big thing in policing. In policing, you have to get the balance right between exercising the laws, the powers that you have, and not infringing on people's rights. So what they say is that we have a lot of powers to do, or rights to do a lot of things, a lot of authority, but you should do what's right. Yeah. So
Use your.
yes.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to use your common sense. The other complexity around this is that although a person is allowed to have 7 grams, that's all they're allowed to do. So how did they get it? Because they can't import it, they can't buy it, they can't smoke it. So it makes it very complex in terms of policing. But in terms of the smoking, someone smoking, that goes back to before I was born. So that's been happening in Bermuda for many years, and it's just about using your discretion. It's not lawful, but why would you or would you not do something or not do something? So you have to decide on that at the time.
Sure. Naima? Because he's had the mic for a little while there.
That's all right.
He's like
Sorry.
taking over. There's a marked increase in violent crime this year after 0, what we call shootings or whatever, in 2019, as far as shooting deaths. What do you think, or what is your trend of thought on why there's such a... Do you think the COVID again had something to do with this?
COVID has so much to do with everything. COVID, we've seen people's stress levels go up, people's outlook on life. COVID is actually quite present in how we police, how we look at different things. So I don't want to blame everything on COVID, but COVID has really changed the way in which we police, how we look at things. Is violent crime as a result of that? It could be, it could not be. It could be different dynamics that's actually been bubbling over for quite some time that's now come to light. There's so many different variables. But what's key is that we need the community back into it. I'm the superintendent with community policing, and we all know who is involved in things, we know who is moving about, and what we need is that we need that community input. We need people to be as frustrated as they can be and put that information forward to the police so we can try to solve it. Yes, people could say you can put indoors and you can arrest people, but a lot of these issues are very systemic back that's starting from people's childhood, and we actually need to just try to address it earlier. So if it's one thing that you've seen with the police that we've learned while we survey and continue to learn is that we have to have these partnerships. We have to have the partnerships with the schools, with the counselors, because the matters that we see coming out now where people are actually partaking in violence is actually a root problem that started years and years ago that should have been addressed.
So you would see this with Pastor Leroy being, what is it, gang reduction coordinator, et cetera.
Yeah.
He plays a key role in your opinion there.
Yeah, he does.
Yes.
Actually, last week we had a neighborhood meeting up at City Hill area, and it's exactly that. The community is coming together to say, how can we as a community, not just the police, how can we as a community bring all of our skills together, bring all of our eyes and our knowledge and our experience, how can we get together and save our community? Because that's when we're going to start seeing results.
Sure. So in essence, gang violence has spiked partially due to COVID, but I'm also hearing from the streets it was because there was no marijuana or herb, as they call it, and that people were using this, whatever, Molly, mixed with alcohol.
Yeah, obviously it's no scientific evidence that dictates that, that determines that has told us that from our intelligence source, we're hearing the same thing as you, that we're using the, what they call is a drug similar to ecstasy, mixing it with alcohol, and then it makes your mind a little different than it normally should be.
Out of control.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
However, but I think it's some more complexity around that. It's not this where you can just put your nail on one single trigger. It's lots of things. Like as Miss Astwood says, it starts from young and it's coming up. So that's why I think in Bermuda we need what we call a whole system, whereby from the time a child is born to the time he or she goes to college, we should have, protocols in place whereby we're monitoring and assisting that kid or those kids to, to get through, and sheltering them from those, bad elements of the community. And in terms of the gang violence hasn't gone away. And you have to remember, in Bermuda, we have factions that are fighting amongst each other that live quite close. So tonight, you and I are friends, and tomorrow we're enemies. So how do you get in between that? Because these guys know each other's movements, they know where they live, they know each other's mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers, and to try to get in between that is quite complex.
Do you think that Pastor Leroy Bean is like living that's the difficult job he has there to try and defuse matters?
Yeah, it's extremely difficult because, as I often say, when you get a person 17, 18, 19 and they're starting to pick up knives and guns, it's kind of too late. They should have been worked on when they were early. And I don't like to write people off because you have rehabilitation and all the other services that can try to bring them back around. However, the secret is to try to do it early, because what they say, if you don't pay now, you pay later, and that's what's happening.
Sure. You can tell my cousin, he'll keep the mic, right? But Naima, what about dealing with people who break the COVID quarantine? What is that? Because somebody came in just the other day, I think it went work, and they caught him at a restaurant. Another one just the other day, people's head testing, and then that must be difficult for police working with the health department, trying to stay on top of getting people who break the quarantine.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, I am one of the civil commanders from the police side dealing with quarantines, COVID. And as those being reported out, most people are quite complicit. People are doing exactly what they have to do. We do have these cases that hit the media, and then it seems like, oh my gosh, no one is doing what they have to do. But for the majority, people are doing what they have to do. And when people don't do what they're supposed to do, our thing is to try to approach them and speak to a rationale point of view. We're not trying to place people before the courts unless we try to give you warnings and you're not adhering to it, because obviously we're trying to keep our country safe, but we're not trying to criminalize anyone either. So when these cases happen, we have to go on a case-by-case scenario, and in the media, some of the things that are reported are actually not factual, but we always can't speak to it because it's people's personal medical history. But some of the things are not factual, but when we deal with it, we try to take an approach of understanding and warning.
Do you think that we could become a police state because of COVID?
No, I don't think, we have systems and protocols in place, so whereby we call what we call the 4 E's, right? So if you see a person that may be on borderline breaching, first of all, you engage them, find out what's going on, you explain to them why they should or shouldn't be doing something, and then you encourage them to try to do the right thing. And then at the end, if those 3 E's don't work, you go to the 4th E and you enforce. So it's a 4-step process before you even get to that enforcement level. But like I said, Mike, police are constantly fighting this battle between keeping people safe and preventing crime, or versus protecting people's rights, infringing on people's rights. It's very difficult.
Here's the question that I can't wait to hear you two respond on. What concerns the two of you the most about the Bermuda? I hope Gary don't jump in here, right, Gary? Rainer, former boss. But what concerns the two of you most about the Bermuda Police Service?
I would say for me it's, I always say the best part of my job is people, and sometimes the worst part of my job is people. And you can have all the processes in the world, you can learn all the new techniques, but if people's core is not right, then you can't implement things correctly. So the most difficult part is, when you want to implement change and different prospects, you have some people that just don't want to do it. So it's just a little bit more difficult to make that happen. But the most positive part is that we work with people. That's our job. If you don't like people, if you're not a people person, then this is not a job for you. But that is difficult, but that's what we signed up for. Policing is dynamic, the world is dynamic, and we just have to keep rolling and seeing if something's not working, try another avenue. If that's not working, call your friend that you've met in the UK or in the US to say, how can I better improve the system? But it all surrounds people. And we all know dealing with people is the most tangible, fragile, exciting, all the different adjectives you want to put around it. So what's the most difficult part? Is people. Is whenever you have to deal with people, the emotions.
People make the world go
People make the world go around, but you just got to be emotionally intelligent on how you're going to deal with people. And the key thing I've learned is that it's not just one rule for everybody. Everyone has a different circumstance. You just have to take that time to understand where they're coming from, the different impacts that lie in between it, and how you can improve it. Because if you spend that time, like Mr. Daniel said, you spend that time dealing with people, it takes a lot out of your day. But then hopefully in the future it doesn't happen again and they're a better person. And I'm a better person.
Okay. The most difficult.
For me, it's obviously communication. Communication is key, and that's both external and internal. So, I always, how can I say it? I always try to reflect and always try to be a better
from your own experience.
Yeah, to be a better public speaker. But I think I was focusing on the wrong thing, because you can speak some fantastic language, but you're not understood. So communication for me is to make sure that we understand each other, both externally and internally. And as we see what's happening around the world today, because of the misunderstanding between the police and the community, and it's a lot more of that mixed into that because of the lack of fairness and parity amongst different races and the like. But in terms of Bermuda, I think we have an opportunity because our police service basically reflects our community. Our police service is very diverse. How do you, in that diverse world, how do you embrace and celebrate difference, and so we can communicate and all we can be on the same page. So for me, I think communication is a big thing for me, and I'm seeing us fold on and be lifted up based on good or bad communication.
Yeah. One thing that always concerned me, like say if I'm out and about, cricket game or something like that, and people see the police coming, you see them get a little, out of the corner of the eye watching you, and then one guy wants to be the show-off. And I say, I couldn't be a police officer. It takes a lot of patience to be a police officer. But here we go. One of the most difficult things police face today, other than communication and people?
The unknown. They say the worst thing to deal with in police is the unknown. So when you know something is happening, you could plan for it. The unknown of, we have the pandemic, what this looks like. We have the curfew that's being lifted.
Today?
Yeah, exactly. And is policing the unknown, what would that look like? What type of contingency plans we have to put in place? Sometimes you're in a room and you're saying, okay, how can we plan for this? And you may put your efforts there and then actually something else happens. So you got to be able to quickly shift around and say, okay, how am I going to deal with this? So the hardest part in policing is actually the unknown. We can only go by trends and predictions and say, what is the rest of the world doing, or what has Bermuda done in the past, and try to plan for it. But that unknown factor could catch you off guard real quick.
I mean, for me, it's this whole outlook. So in terms of the risk and threat out there, so you have technology that's advanced and fast and everything, so you can get messages out fast and the police even know a crime happened. So how do we respond when we get there? Because we're already behind the April. Then you have cybercrime on the other side that's really ravaging on people's bank accounts and the like. And then the other big thing, like I said, is diversity. People are living longer. Communities are so diverse. How do you get into these communities and understand these people's cultures and get them to, to speak back to you? Because in some corners, people don't talk to you. And then on top of that, you're trying to fix all of that with less money, less resources, and less people. And people's expectations are higher. Yeah. So all of that in a mishmash is a complex situation. And I think the outlook for policing, and I think that's why we have these courses like the SCCs, because you get all of the minds together to share information. And our idea is to try to just build that highly professional organization that when confronted with this, they are skilled enough to be able to respond.
Naima, does it concern you? I've been hearing cut in funds for police. It's been widely spread that politicians are saying we've got to cut some money from them. I'm not exactly sure. I've heard 400,000, but I could be wrong on that. Does it concern you to cut funds? I'm sure you're probably hoping there would be an increase in funds.
Well, I don't really like to speak to the funding part. My job is to come with a plan and make sure that it's executed. In relation to what's going to happen in the future is one of those unknowns, and when it comes, we have to police around it.
Sure. Police overseas, shunned upon right now, some of them anyway, since George Floyd murder. What's the situation with local police and cameras, wearing the body camera or video cameras?
We do have body cameras that the officers were all on patrol. But the key thing is that a lot of the tactics that are deployed by U.S. officers, we just simply do not do in Bermuda. We have a different training regime when it comes to applying officer safety and tactics. So some of the things even we see, we will look at them and most cringe and say, okay, I can't believe they're using that. But it's just different policing styles, different policing guidelines. But obviously, we follow the UK model, which obviously doesn't deploy a lot of those tactics.
Sure. Yeah, I'm the same. We're guided by the manual of guidance in firearms. So our how can I say, culture is different. So in the U.S., as you know, their amendment allows them to have right to firearms. In Bermuda, it's right to life. So it's a wide thing. So on one end, listen, my main thing is I want a gun. In Bermuda, my main thing I want to survive. So it's a different paradigm. So from that very paradigm, our firearms officers, when they go out, if they have to use force, it has to be lawful. It has to be proportionate to whatever they're dealing with. So if some guy is running away and it's not a threat, they're not going to shoot
from you.
Yeah. So it's a very different paradigm. Now, don't get me wrong. There will be where the friction hits, because policing is kind of a contact sport, right? So in order to keep people safe, sometimes you have to go in people's pockets, you have to kick in doors, you have to do searches on the street, you have to do a lot of intrusive things, so you're going to get that pushback sometimes. However, the way we train our officers is we try to do that with the less force as necessary.
Sure. Okay, we're sort of winding it down here, just one or two more questions, so Gary won't look at me funny. What's it like, my good friend, Mr. Corbishley, working? He seems like, I've interviewed other commissioners over the years and been around them, right? He seems like very good, easygoing, but on-point guy. What's it like working with Mr. Stephen Corbesley?
I mean, we've had several, I worked under several commissioners, and what you learn is that everyone brings something different to the table, but actually that just helps you to grow as a leader. One thing we learned is important how you manage up, you manage out, you manage down. And it's just understanding the boundaries that somebody puts in place and the field in which you're going to play within them. So it's probably a bit different for you, but we've been over to the UK to see the different styles of policing and different officers. It was about close to 50 of us over in the course. So we understand that style of policing, that outward facing and how they're trying to reach the community. So also maybe a bit of a shock to Bermuda, we understand the type of policing it brings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just, as Naima said, we've worked under so many commissioners, so many different styles, so many policing styles. And for me, it's always important to do your job right. So for me, my job is to tackle violent crime, right? So I have to just get it right. But hopefully you have whoever the commissioner is to enable you to be able to do that. And that's all we ask. So one of the funny things that was always told to me is that when you sit up in that particular office where I sit, if I didn't come to work or my bosses didn't come to work, the community probably wouldn't even know. But if the guys down on the ground didn't come to work, then we're in problem. So our job is to make sure that our people are properly supported, properly trained, properly respected, so that they can be their best self.
Sure. This is it. Last question. What have I not touched on that you want to say? Is there anything that you want to convey to the public, whether it be to assist with recruiting more officers or just a general comment? We're closing out. Final question. Anything that we've missed that you want to get over, that you want to say? The policing is a great job. I started years ago thinking I was just going to try it out and see where I go, and I'm still here. There's many careers within one. I was just speaking to my daughter last night to say, if you're looking for a job to go into where you don't want to be bored, the policing is absolutely the way to go. We're well trained, great interactions, communication with different people. I got to go on a course with Mr. Daniels. I've never been on a course with Mr. Daniels, but it was great because we actually had some good downtimes where we just had some good conversations, and just understanding people's perspective is huge. It's really huge. So I really enjoyed the course. I enjoyed policing, and most of all is that we're human, and we couldn't have done any of this without our families. I always have to say big shout out to my husband and my children who just support us in policing. It's long hours, it's high demands, it's stressful, it's time away from home, but they always seem to support us. So if I could say anything else, thank you, Dennis, Amani, and Medina.
Yeah, I echo everything Ms. Astwood says. It's in policing, as difficult as the job it is, the role it is, it's also very enlightening because we set ourselves up to serve, right? So that's what it is. We serve the community, and when the community is happy, we're happy because we're highly embedded, we're deeply embedded into the community, because when we go home, we can't drive up to the suburbs. We drive into the heart of the community. So for me, it's about working with people, helping people to feel better, helping people to feel safe. And I'm just happy for the opportunities that I've had. Traveled halfway around the world, being a police officer on different investigations, different training, even going to bring people back who fled the island. So for me, it's been a wonderful experience. And like I said, Mr. Astwood, big thank you to my family as well for all the support they give me.
Sure. Assistant Commissioner of Police Antoine Daniels and Superintendent Naima Astwood, two of Bermuda's finest. I think Bermuda's in good hands in the future going forward. Thank you for taking out some of your precious time to come by and share with us all of your thoughts, and God bless you and good luck in the future.
Thank you so
for
much.
inviting us.